and a God who is the Creator, a loving Creator, our Good Shepherd. We also come to a place where Jesus Christ dwells. And Jesus Christ is our pain bearer. Isaiah talks about how He bore our sufferings. He took on our griefs. He took on our anguish. He is our pain bearer. He understands what it is like to go through pain and anguish. And then finally, the Holy Spirit is with us. The Spirit is a life giver. He is sent to be our comforter and our advocate. And together, this Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, with us, and I would like you to think of them as the seat, that comfortable seat that you are sitting in as we come into this topic this morning. So sit back. What we're going to talk about now is we're going to have a video, and this is by an NBA player, Kevin Love, who plays for the Cavaliers, or used to play for the Cavaliers, and his own experience with anxiety. So Luke, if I could turn over to you to whack on that video. Brilliant.
You have an injury, so to speak, and you have a knee injury or my hand or, it's an ankle sprain. It's a lot different when you can't see it and somebody doesn't know what's going on outside the lines. Everybody's going through something. Success is not immune to depression.
So Kevin, you are now the new face of mental health in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel?
At first, it was a little scary. I think from suffering with anxiety and depression for a long time into having my first panic attack on November 5th and not really knowing what that meant to fast forwarding being here now, it's changed my frame of mind, and I really do believe in writing my piece that everybody is going through something. So knowing that it doesn't discriminate and knowing that I'm trying to change the stigma, not only for people in sports, but all over. And I remember talking to my agent, and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because a lot of people are going to talk about it." I said, "Jeff, I don't know if anybody will, but just understand, I'm trying to help people." He goes, "I get it. If you help one person, if you help one kid, it could be absolutely life-changing and groundbreaking for that kid."
Let's talk about the panic attack for a minute, because that's when the world got a little glimpse of what was going on. So take us through what happened that night.
Well, it was very scary for me because I have always had the anxiety, and like a lot of people, when either it's like for example, you want to go to bed or you want to go to sleep and you think, I have a big game the next day. And so what happens? You plan your routine, you try to go to sleep, you get ready, and then you dig up the worst things that have happened the last 10 years for you. So I think it was a combination of things that were going on in my life that led up to that point, as well as it was a 5-7 start, and on November 5th, I just remember not quite feeling right. I remember we went through a few plays, there was a timeout, I got to the huddle, and that's when I felt something that I'd never felt before. I couldn't catch my breath. I felt like my mind was completely out, and Ty Lue had said something to me. I told him I'll be right back. I ran in the locker room. I was essentially searching for something that I couldn't find. I didn't know this feeling, and then I just basically ran to our trainer's room, fell on the ground, collapsed, and my heart was jumping out of my chest, and I couldn't get air to my lungs, and essentially was trying to clear my throat, sticking my hand down my throat, trying to get myself
Seriously?
air. Yeah, so it was.
You must have been terrified.
It was terrifying. I thought I was having a heart attack. I really felt like I was going to die in this moment. I'm getting hot thinking about it. It was a moment that nobody wants to have, but it was very eye-opening. And then going to the hospital after that, everything checked out, and I was basically thinking to myself, well, what happened? I've now come to a point where I just kind of lay all my cards out on the table and say, this is what you get. And having that freedom of mind is something that I've never really had. It's actually given me peace. And sometimes things get worse in order to get better. Sometimes there is a rock bottom, but I know that people reaching out for help or talking to someone, it does really work. And for so long I put that off, thinking I didn't need it, because that was my playbook when I was young, is to suppress it and be a man. And I think the masculinity thing is kind of misleading in a lot of ways, because when that's ingrained in your mind in an early age, you feel that way throughout. I wish I would have had the presence of mind earlier on to face these things, but
Sure.
I think everybody has their moment, their aha moment, or that moment where they're able to come forward with these type of things.
So now I'm going to ask you what everyone wants to know. What's LeBron doing during this time?
Well, I remember the first thing he said to me after that came out was that, he shook my hand on the back of the bus, and, kind of let everybody get off, and he said, you really helped a lot of people today. You helped a lot, not only a lot of kids, but you helped a lot of people. So that was a special moment, but, I couldn't go a few minutes without another person in that community I talk about coming forward and saying, hey, this is my experience and I want to share this with you. So it was a way of seeing a lot of people are being vulnerable, and also, sharing experiences and having that community and saying we need to beat down this stigma together.
So stigma is still the problem. There's
Stigma.
still plenty of guys that have issues, and they don't need to come forward to me or to you, but
Right.
they do need to get the help. But there are players out there that think you're soft because you did this. They think DeMar's soft. They're going to think everybody that comes forward is soft. What do you say to them?
Like, it's such a tired statement. Like, I put my time in this league. Guys put their time in this league. To be in the NBA, you're not soft. And to come forward with this, it's, like I said, that's tired, it's outdated, and it actually, in the end, is probably, for me, it was the best thing I did, and it's only going to help you moving forward. And it doesn't just mean basketball players or anywhere in sports. This isn't everyone, every community.
Powerful story. Big man, successful man, has a panic attack in the middle of a game. He's not the only one to experience anxiety like that. I want us to think about anxiety something like an iceberg. That above the waterline, what you see is sort of the visible physical manifestations, or the visible manifestations of anxiety. And then to talk about what perhaps is below the waterline. And an iceberg, roughly about 90% of its mass is actually below the waterline. So this is the little metaphor for this morning. Anxiety as something of an iceberg. And when we look at what's above the waterline, anxiety can exhibit itself in sweaty palms, a dry throat, elevated heart rate, feeling paralyzed to act or to think, excessive worry, sleep problems, fatigue, irritable, avoidance, and panic attacks. So that's what we might observe when we're going through periods of anxiety, ourselves or watching others that are going through anxiety. But what's below the waterline? Well, I think firstly there's fears. There's fears about performance, fears about the social anxiety, going into certain social situations. And this may be a little bit anxious for you. You're having to sit around a table with some people that you know, some people that you may not know. And we'll be conversing with them a little bit later on about a subject that is actually quite close to us. That can be anxious forming in itself. Then there is FOMO, the fear of missing out. And our devices today, with social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever it might be, Facebook, let us know very quickly what is going on in the world and what is going on with our friends and when they're on holiday and when they're having these amazing events and whatever. And oftentimes what is put on those posts are the best, the highlights, the amazing things. We don't necessarily put in the mundane of having a shower or brushing your teeth in the morning. Great, put that on Facebook. Hey, I just brushed my teeth. Well done. It's usually a holiday snap. We have this fear of missing out that is actually fed, unfortunately, by our devices. And then there's powerlessness, the whole thing that comes when we read about an event. What's going on in the Ukraine, global economic crisis, COVID. We are so powerless to do anything about that. We hear this stuff, and yet it hits us very hard, but we're powerless to act. That can be another form of anxiety cause. So the next level is unmet needs. Food, shelter, rest, clothing, finances, sense of belonging, being part of a community, freedom to be who I am, certainty, having a voice, being able to express myself freely. All these things, if they're lacking and if we're seeking for them, can actually lead and be sources of anxiety. Trauma, physical, mental, sexual, intergenerational. Intergenerational trauma is where our grandparents or their grandparents have experienced a trauma in the past. And as a result of that trauma, that grief and that anxiety has been transferred from generation to generation to generation. And as a country in New Zealand, we're going to have to come to grips with the reality that for many Māori, they have and do experience intergenerational trauma for what they experienced with the confiscation of lands in the 1800s. And today, there are many Māori who are actually suffering from the anxiety that comes from that intergenerational trauma. Then there's spiritual trauma. Experiences where we have been in a spiritual place and somewhere along the line there has been abuse. And that can be in the Christian environment, it can be somewhere else. And we've been let down. And now to come into a place of worship is actually anxiety forming. It triggers an anxiety. So these traumas are there that are buried below, and when we come into certain spaces, they can be triggered to cause anxiety. Illness, whether it's psychological or otherwise, can also be another form of anxiety. And finally, I think an existential crisis. Who am I? Why? What is my purpose? How do I make sense of my life? How do I deal with guilt and shame? These are things that are deep down, and sometimes in life we have to wrestle with them, and they rise to the surface, and we are wrestling with this, and they cause us anxieties. So the iceberg, anxiety as an iceberg, where so much is hidden below the surface. Psalm 22, to me, is one of the biblical examples of an iceberg experience. The psalmist is actually King David. And he says in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me and from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear. And in the night season, and am not silent. And then in verses 14 and 15, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. It's a piece of pottery that's just sort of dry and broken. And my tongue clings to my jaws. You have brought me to the dust of death. But you, O Lord, do not be far from me. O my strength, hasten to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. Now in that last verse, he's not talking about literal dogs or literal lions or literal oxen, okay? Even though I imagine getting in the middle of all that three would be quite an anxious forming environment. But no, he's talking about the forces that are coming against him, whether it's people or there's some calamity that he is being experienced. Go back to verses 1 and 2. What is he talking about? He's talking about crying out to God yet hearing silence. And in our anxieties, often it seems like God is not listening. Verses 14 and 15, he talks about the physical effects of his anxieties. And in anxiety, we can feel and be completely overwhelmed. We can go into this space of actual physical breakdown. And then in verses 19 through 21a, it's this whole thing that his community has turned against him, that he's isolated and attacked. And he's crying out. In the back end of 21, verse 21, is this very small and simple phrase, and it says, "You have answered me." And it's the pivot in the psalm. King David doesn't say how God has answered him. He doesn't talk about the salvation that came to him, the journey out from this moment. All he says is that you have answered me. And I want to leave that with you as something to perhaps consider, that in our anxieties, actually all of us, in coming out of anxiety, will have a different experience and a different journey. There is no one size fits all. Well, how do we melt the iceberg? How do we start to get some warm water around this iceberg so that it starts to lessen, starts to become reduced in our life? Well, I want to suggest two broad areas. And the first we've talked about is, and here's some sources of warmth. The first one is the triune God. And we've talked about this at the front end. But that God, our loving Creator, is there. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. And that is our second thing, that Christ, our pain bearer. Isaiah 53, surely our griefs he has taken. And then Matthew 11:28, he says, come unto me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So we have this pain bearer who invites us in to lay our pain and our burdens at his feet. And then the Holy Spirit, which isn't showing on the my screen. It's not showing up there. No? Okay, you've got it. Great. The Holy Spirit. No, you don't actually see it. Oh well. Our comforter, our advocate. In Ephesians, it talks about the Holy Spirit as being our seal, our guarantee for the day of redemption. And in Galatians, it talks about how the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. The Holy Spirit infuses within us a different type of life. So there's one source of the warm water coming in to melt the iceberg. On the other side of things, I think there's earthly helps. Our community. Galatians 2, bear one another's burdens. Romans 15:2, bear one another's burdens. We all go through anxiety at different stages, at different times in life. And having a community such as this, who understands that, who gathers around and journeys with us through our anxiety, is a huge thing. Our first port of call is actually our friends, our family, to help us journey through the anxieties of life. Second is counselors. Proverbs 17:24 talks about seeking after wisdom, seeking wise counselors. And I would want to put out there that we have today these amazing health professionals who study so much, learn so much about the physical causes of anxiety, the social causes of anxiety, the traumatic causes of anxiety. We have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in our health professionals, and that we should be looking to our health professionals in our healing. So our health professionals, counsellors, our ministry team, our pastors are all part of that group that we can call upon to help us in our journey through anxiety. And lastly, I want to draw attention to the creation and to Sabbath. When God made the heavens and the earth, he said that these things were good. And then he rested on the seventh day. So a couple of things here. Firstly, to enjoy creation, to get out there, to get some time in the fresh air. If you like going running, go for a run. If you like a walk, go for a walk. If it's a cycle, go for a cycle. If you like a tramp, go for a tramp. If you like playing games, go out and play games. Get out in creation, enjoy the fresh air. If you like to just sit and enjoy a sunset, sit and enjoy a sunset or a sunrise. Just get some time, take a Sabbath, rest, give yourself permission to put aside the challenges of life and to rest. The last thing that I want to leave with you, and you'll discuss this at your tables, is do we reframe, and can we reframe, anxiety? Foe or a friend? Is it a foe? Yes, anxiety paralyzes me. It causes me fear. Yes, there's shame, there's isolation, and unfortunately, and this is what Kevin Love was talking about, is that there are those stigmas still around anxiety in our life. And so we isolate ourselves and we feel shame as a result. There's helplessness and illness that is there in anxiety. That's the foe side of things. But is it a friend? You see, when there's anxiety, it alerts me to unrightness. Now, some of you who are English people, I say English people, but people who are wordsmiths will be quite anxious about the way that I've actually used the word unrightness right now. Horrible use of the word. But my point is that when I'm experiencing anxiety, when we're experiencing anxiety, there is something either not right within myself or not right within the world around me. That is an alert. And on alert, I then am allowed to focus and make action. So when I come to this message this morning, I've spent a lot of time preparing for this, getting that slideshow that was not quite working out for me, getting it working, There's a reason for everything on those slides, believe it or not. So I focus. My anxiety causes me to focus. Anxiety causes me to make action, to go about change. Whether you believe in climate change or not, we can have a good discussion about that. But climate change is certainly something's going on. That's alerting us. That's an anxiety around that should cause us to bring an action somehow or somewhere. And then lastly, anxiety provides us with insight. It provides us, I think, with a level of empathy. When you have experienced an anxiety panic attack, you have experienced what Kevin Love has gone through. You know exactly how afraid he was in that moment. You know exactly what he was feeling. And you can meet with him and you can empathize with him. And I think in our anxiety, it actually gives us a common space to be able to talk with others and to be able to minister the gospel to others who also are battling with anxiety. Also in our anxiety, I think when we read the scriptures, our eyes are opened to the reality of the anxieties that the authors in the scriptures were also experiencing. And that can then minister to us. So maybe anxiety is not so much a foe, but it has potential to be a friend that we can journey through life with, because it actually makes us more empathetic. Lastly, some safe places. There's a pastoral team who, if there's been issues that have been raised for you in this, would love to be able to talk with you. Myself and my wife, who was on 180 this morning, which is the children's program, will be here afterwards, and we would love to be able to connect with you if there are things that you'd love to discuss. And finally, please do reach out to your GP, your health professional, if there's some issues here that really need to be discussed at perhaps a deeper level. So do utilise the resources that are available to you, and I think we've got some information at the back. I'm going to hand over to Joseph. He's going to now direct us in our discussions. Thank you.